We have multiple major updates regards to the Toronto Raptors president of basketball operations. The hunt that started when Masai Ujiri was fired by the organization. Now, we know who's been leading the charge on bringing in a new president, how Bobby Webster is looking out there in the race for this role, and we finally have a timeline on when we can expect this position to be announced and what's currently going on with these discussions. So lots of stuff to break down out here in this video. But folks, you guys have been supporting the channel a ton over the course of this off season as we patiently wait for the Raptors to name their next president so we can move forward with the direction of this organization. So if you don't want to miss a single thing and you are a part of the over 53% of our viewers that have not hit the subscribe button just yet, make sure you guys hit that sub button so you don't miss a single thing that's going on with this Toronto Raptors team. But there are a lot of things to discuss, so let's dive straight into it. As Doug Smith came out with a report and really revealed what's happening behind the scenes. So he came out and said that it's expected someone will be in the job well before the opening of training camp in late September, perhaps right before or just after Labor Day weekend. So this is big news. This is very, very important because we are all very much anticipating what the Toronto Raptors are going to do with this role. No big trades. We heard all the discourse, all the discussions about RJ Barrett getting traded, and I've been outspoken about how I want to keep RJ Barrett out here on the roster unless we're getting, a big superstar out there in return. But the cap situation makes things messy. It's been the main topic of discussion for Raptors fans this entire summer. At this point now, that move is not going to happen. No big blockbuster trades, no big stuff. There'll be rumblings, there'll be this, there'll be that, but none of these big game-changing moves to the Toronto Raptors are going to happen or get shut down. A new president comes in and say, hey, we're keeping this, we're shutting down all the noise, the rumors, until the next president is named. And Labor Day is September 2nd, when I Googled it right before I started here. So basically, there's an expectation in the next couple weeks that this position will be announced. And we have some developments in terms of what's going on with this position as well. Essentially, MLSE and the searching firm helping with the process have had several interviews that began in Las Vegas around the Summer League season and included an MLSE retreat led by Edward Rogers earlier this month. No firm decision has been made, but several sources involved at various levels suggest the move will be coming soon. So a couple of very important things there. So firstly, Doug Smith is doubling down that this move is coming soon. And, that's, Labor Day. Expect that to be happening. But the real interesting part of this is Edward Rogers is leading retreats. Your company retreats, who knows where, that ends up happening. But basically, Edward Rogers is leading the charge. He is the guy that's making decisions. And while Keith Pele, the guy at MLSE we're seeing being the spokesperson for Masai Ujiri being fired, say, took the onus. Oh, it was my decision Masai Ujiri was fired. On none of this stuff, I'll blame it on old Eddie or anything like that. Edward Rogers is the one behind the Masai firing. He did not want to pay him in 2021. He did not want to pay the expensive price tag Masai. Some people say it's warranted, just given how bad the Toronto Raptors have been, especially in recent seasons. That's neither here nor there. But the one thing that we do have to accept is Edward Rogers is leading the charge, leading the way here now in this direction. Now, what does that mean for the search? Because he's actually been fairly positive, in the reports that have leaked in terms of his impressions of Bobby Webster. And we'll talk about him out there on, this video as it goes along. But Edward Rogers is leading the charge, but it's been talked about. It's been discussed, and Keith Pele's the mouthpiece for this. They're looking for a strong business person with a business background to lead the basketball operations. And Doug Smith kind of builds on this in more reports, saying that when Ujiri's departure was made public, according to MLSE chief executive Keith Pele, ownership was okay with where the franchise was and its climb back into the Eastern Conference relevance. The new leader, Pele said, would be a basketball person solely, and the feeling around the NBA is that MLSE does not need to hit a public relations home run, but wants a solid, knowledgeable basketball person to take the helm. So reading between the tea leaves, reading between the reports, if we keep things, in the direction here, I don't think this hurts Bobby Webster's chances of making this, getting this role, getting this position. And a lot of people view him as the favorite, a lot of Raptors fans, because the Raptors, say what you want about the past couple seasons. There's been a lot of criticism thrown the way of Masai, and the Siakam trade, that was Masai's doing, and it was reported from Michael Grange that Bobby Webster actually wanted to extend Siakam, so I would have sided with Webster there. I think it's, the grass isn't always greener when you move away from Bobby. And of course, we hear these terms businessman and stuff like that. Bobby Webster, he's a free spirit. He's a young spirit, but I believe it's his destiny to actually get this role out there as president of basketball operations for this team, just because he is such a cap guru. He's well respected across the NBA. And the way that Masai Ujiri gained that reputation as someone that really was a tough guy to negotiate with. And we heard all the rumors, the Raptors getting in the mix on all these trade topics, trade discussions, and they never actually go through because everyone's afraid to get fleeced by Masai. Bobby Webster was actually the guy that led the way on the Kawhi Leonard deal. He was the one doing most of the negotiations, the guy that got a lot of the credit. So he is well respected, less feared across the NBA. And it's the guy that I'd be most excited about bringing in, which might be crazy to say, but as said, they aren't trying to hit a public relations home run. They don't need the biggest names in the world or anything like that to make this happen. Just a guy that knows basketball, that's solid, and all of those types of things. So basically, if they extended his contract, they raved about how they liked the organization management was. Masai Ujiri's cut was less, I think, on the basketball side and more of Eddie Rogers, not Uncle Eddie Rogers, not wanting to pay Masai Ujiri that bread. So that's what's happening there, but there are some other names that are being brought up. And, he's in the thumbnail of this one. There's one guy from Indiana that has been turning heads and would be my probably favorite outside of Bob Myers external candidate. So what's going on here? As the Indiana Pacers president has been linked to the same job the Raptors through this summer. And it's logical that Pritchard has overseen a successful growth path with the Indiana Pacers, the current Eastern Conference champions, who have a well-balanced, not too expensive roster that works. And we know, Eddie Rogers sees winning team that's not that expensive. He's licking his lips at a potential candidate out there on that front. Doug Smith went on to say it's expected someone will be went on to say, but Pritchard has 1 year left on his deal in Indiana, and it would be a lateral move. And Toronto would have to sweeten things for the Pacers ownership to accept. There are those around the league who wonder if there isn't just a bit of leverage creation attached to the discussion. Still, it's a name everyone heard immediately, and there's no reason to think the interest isn't legitimate. And a report dating back a couple weeks ago indicates that he's atop the list in terms of the Raptors search. But of course, being under contract, the Pacers, the Raptors do offer more, of a long-term option. The Pacers, while I joke and, Edward Rogers has paid out money in the past. Just gave Vladimir Guerrero Jr. like $500 million. Is, top of a giant, the cell phone bills speak for themselves in terms of the money that Rogers Communication has to throw behind the Toronto Raptors. But we are a team that's more willing to pay than the Indiana Pacers, who are regarded as one of the cheapest organizations out there in the league. So, Pritchard coming in would be a guy that he'd have more options, more tools to play with this Raptors team, even though the Pacers are currently better constructed, of course, coming off a finals appearance. Halliburton is dealing with an injury for the next season, so that is one thing to factor in, one thing to discuss. But I think, especially where he's 1 year left on his deal, could maybe get paid more money here, would be an interesting fit. But he is one guy, it's an external candidate that's been brought up. Other names that have been discussed that I don't want to gloss over. Dwayne Casey has interviewed for the position multiple times, according to reports this summer. So he is a guy that I don't think is a favorite right now, but don't be surprised if Dwayne Casey does get one of those roles. We've talked about him already a bit this summer. And Bob Myers was listed out there in this article as well. Of course, the architect behind the Golden State Warriors dynasty. So that is someone that would be super cool. I don't think it's super realistic that he will be wanting to leave his cushy job as an announcer there to get right back in the fire. Apparently he loves being around his family and stuff, and it was getting intense out there with Golden State. So I'm not sure if this Raptors position would be his, window to jump back in, but you never know. So those are the names that have been listed. There's been a few thrown out there as well. Mark Eversley, I think he'd be more in a GM role, currently with the Chicago Bulls, formerly with the Toronto Raptors, had a key role in Brian Colangelo's regime here with the Raptors, and was one of the key factors in terms of drafting DeMar DeRozan. But I think the way you bring in Eversley is if Bobby Webster gets promoted to president, and then, you have Eversley out there as GM. So that's the likely, destination things. But the big exciting news on this is we're getting a decision soon before Labor Day, and then we can really move forward about, depending on who we get in, we can look at their history and see what the expected moves, what the expected developments, and the next steps are for this Toronto Raptors team. But let me know what you guys think about all these updates out there in the comments section down below. You guys are the best. Thank us, subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.